Jordan Peterson, you've said that men need to, quote, grow the hell up. Tell me why.
Well, because there's nothing uglier than an old infant. There's nothing good about it. People who don't grow up don't find the sort of meaning in their life that sustains them through difficult times, and they are certain to encounter difficult times. And they're left bitter and resentful and without purpose and adrift and hostile and resentful and vengeful and arrogant and deceitful and of no use to themselves and of no use to anyone else and no partner for a woman, and there's nothing in it that's good.
Oh, my dear, dear friends, we sadly have another example of a disturbing trend for you today. Before I start, I want to say that it is never okay to harass anyone for anything, online or not online. Rachel Revesz from The Independent boldly proclaims misogynistic abuse against Cathy Newman is a symbol of the backlash against the Me Too movement. When white men feel they are losing power, any level of nastiness is possible, and much power has been ceded of late. Really, Rachel? And what power is that now? Are you referring to the legion of beta males who are ashamed of their maleness or embarrassed by their whiteness? You're writing for The Independent. Please give us some examples of ceded power. What a terrible indictment of the times we live in. Those are the words of Ben DePere, the editor of Channel 4 News, relating to the stream of misogynist abuse leveled at presenter Cathy Newman after her interview with clinical psychologist Jordan Peterson. It's astonishing that any critique of Cathy Newman is labeled as misogynist abuse and not criticism. I feel the need to speak up about this subject. If you're talking about unjustified attacks against Miss Newman only because she's a woman, then that's fair. If people are being critical of what she said, that's called criticism. It is only fair that people who have opinions on the recent interview with Jordan Peterson have the right to air them. I have a right too. After viewing it a few times, I can't help thinking that Cathy Newman did a great job of giving a platform to Jordan Peterson and his ideas and convictions. Did she play the devil's advocate, or did she really believe what she was saying? Surely she was not simply agreeing with everything he said. That was obvious. Did she challenge him? Well, yes, many times. I don't believe that we would have had the spectacular outcome of Peterson looking so professional and knowledgeable on the subjects discussed had she not done so. Those subjects discussed were mainly the earnings gap in pay and Peterson's controversial stance on Canadian Bill C-16 and the compelled speech that it requires. Channel 4 News is hiring security experts to carry out an analysis of the incident and is considering police involvement. Peterson, the Canadian professor who compared gender-neutral pronouns to the likes of Chairman Mao's Communist China, emerged from the interview, at least to his loyal YouTube following, victorious. Twitter erupted with commentary about his genius, his calm, his quick wit. Peterson's followers were also quick to attack Newman in a way she has described as vicious. It is interesting to read the hequal analysis of this alleged Twitter abuse. Cathy Newman's feminist fans aimed 30 times more violent sexist abuse at Peterson and his supporters than vice versa. By now, you can't have missed Cathy Newman's car crash interview with the amazing Jordan Peterson. Newman was utterly humiliated throughout and was made to look even more foolish than in her 2016 interview of Milo Yiannopoulos. Newman and Channel 4 are using the age-old feminist tactic of crying abuse when they lose a debate, a tactic used superbly by Jess Phillips to divert attention away from her sexist and childish campaign to try to stop men's issues being debated in Parliament. We searched Twitter for a number of violence-related keywords, which included the username at Cathy Newman, and the results were everything you'd expect. Hequal does an analysis of the Twitter misogyny, noting that worst examples of sexist violence tweets were from Miss Newman supporters, not the other way around. For example, the only violent tweet was by R. Jones UX, a defender of Newman, who wrote the following: "Hey, people abusing Cathy Newman, go fuck yourselves, then do it again, and then die in a fire." And finally, we caught feminist journalist Kate Bevin, who has a verified Twitter account stating the following: standing ovation for Cathy Newman, who is interviewing an ocean-going dickhead on Channel 4 News and hasn't yet punched him. Bevin has over 12,000 followers on Twitter, and uniquely, her tweet contained not just violence, but also the sexism missing from everyone else's tweets. For good measure, Bevin followed up her initial tweet with a clarification saying, "I would have punched him," thus leaving no one in any doubt that she supported violence against Peterson for winning the debate. Links to all source material quoted here will be in the description below if you want all the gory details, but I will finish with hequal's final numbers. Adding up all the tweets, retweets, and likes, we find the following totals: non-sexist violence aimed at Newman or her supporters, 2. Sexist violence aimed at Newman or her supporters, 0. Non-sexist violence aimed at Peterson or his supporters, 8. Sexist violence aimed at Peterson or his supporters, 55. Getting back to Rachel and her independent article about this interview, when white men feel they are losing power, any level of nastiness is possible, and much power has been ceded recently. Amid the steamrolling effect of the Me Too campaign, of the sudden dominance of gender equality in the news, and amid the fall of many great men, here comes the whirling center of the storm when we have to fight harder than ever to be heard. We are in backlash season. So, for January 2018, Cathy Newman will be our fall woman. For those angry at the recent resurgence of feminism, they have had to wait for the moment. It's not easy to defend a serial rapist or even a one-off rapist, although some people do. Let's not forget that 63 million people recently voted for an alleged offender as president. It's not easy to defend a sexual harasser either, although even more people do that. But it is very easy to attack Cathy Newman, the female journalist whose male editor thought it would be a good idea to interview Jordan Peterson. I don't know who exactly is angry at the supposed resurgence of feminism. However, many on the left are concerned about the violent upswing of noise coming from the illiberal left, the adherence to the out-of-control identity politics, and the backlash against the use of postmodernism nonsense to redefine words to the point that they no longer have meaning, and of course, misandry. The aim of these regressives is obvious. It's not to level the playing field. It is not to make things equal for men and women or the marginalized community, a term now popular with social justice warriors. These are not the laudable goals. The outcome that is desired by the authoritarian left is to wrestle control from the patriarchal boogeyman and claim it for themselves.
And the first thing I would suggest is that we may have a basic problem with the game theory of progressivism. It is quite possible that what is taking place is that the left has a bad actor problem that arises out of some of the fundamental assumptions of progressivism. And I don't mean to strike a negative note. I do think it is possible to structure a left that would be more or less immune to a bad actor problem. But what I'm witnessing in the present are bad actors that have control over the entire dialogue, and that is a very dangerous situation. The first thing that I recognized a bit before things went haywire at Evergreen, or at least went haywire publicly, was that the people I was talking to, and most of the population at Evergreen is pretty far left, but I recognized that there was a hidden dichotomy between two populations within the left. One of those populations earnestly wishes equality, and there can be some debate over what it is that is being equalized, but virtually everybody on the left would say that they are for equality of opportunity. Then there is another population that does not wish equality of opportunity. What it wishes to do is to turn the tables of oppression. And the problem for us is that when these two populations are intermingled, they sound alike until the point that you reach something like equality of opportunity, and we are nowhere near that point. At that point, they would clearly diverge, and you would discover that some of the people who had been pursuing some nominal version of equality were really about some radical version of inequity with new people at the head. And I do think that that's what we are facing. And the most confusing aspect of it is that the people who are earnestly seeking something like equality of opportunity are unaware that they have signed up with something unholy and un-American.
When questioned by Newman if he believed that gender equality was a myth, Peterson said only if she meant in terms of outcome. There is a reason women who tend to be compassionate and caring end up as nurses and physicians, he said, while men end up as engineers. If we men and women were to sort ourselves out equally, there would be a dangerous imbalance, he believed.
So let me come back to my
absolute
question.
all-out warfare.
Is gender equality a myth?
I don't know what you mean by the question. Men and women aren't the same, and they won't be the same. That doesn't mean they can't be treated fairly.
Is gender equality desirable?
If it means equality of outcome, then almost certainly it's undesirable. That's already been demonstrated in Scandinavia. Because in Scandinavia...
What do you mean by that? Equality of outcome is undesirable.
Well, men and women won't sort themselves into the same categories if you leave them alone to do it of their own accord. I've already seen that in Scandinavia. It's 20 to 1 female nurses to male, something like that. It might not be quite that extreme, and approximately the same male engineers to female engineers. And that's a consequence of the free choice of men and women in the societies that have gone farther than any other societies to make gender equality the purpose of the law. Those are ineradicable differences. You can eradicate them with tremendous social pressure and tyranny, but if you leave men and women to make their own choices, you will not get equal outcome.
Let's see exactly what he said. Newman also asked why he had the right to air his controversial views. He replied, "I'm a clinical psychologist," with the cool calm of a cartoon villain.
But what gives you the right to say that? I mean, maybe that's how women want their relationships, those women. I mean, you're making these vast generalizations.
I'm a clinical psychologist.
I didn't know that cartoon villains were known for their calm demeanor. But note, the writer of this article is attempting to bias the readers against Jordan Peterson. She asked him, what gives you the right to say that? Rachel Revesz is intentionally misrepresenting the person she's trying to defend, and in doing so, mislead her own readers. Are the media and its employees innocent in this gender equality debate? Certainly not. There has been much wrong with the way the media covered the Me Too campaign. Tabloids pointing to the sleazy rather than the systemic. The routine pitting of feminists against anti-feminists, as if required to balance out the interview. Gifting airtime to the likes of Peterson, or, as Channel 4 News also did, to Milo Yiannopoulos. It will get clicks, after all. Popular media can be a powerful tool, we have to admit. And if their goal was to show Professor Jordan Peterson in a bad light, Channel 4 failed miserably. This is the butthurt shown by this independent article. It is a strange world turned on its head when supposed progressives are fighting against free speech and consider all opinions that contradict their own dogma as violence. That is not to be tolerated or even exist. These issues have propelled a somewhat unknown professor from Ontario into the spotlight. Not all good opinions win out, and not all bad ones will expire immediately upon close examination. But it is the duty of a free society to ensure that free expression is guaranteed, and it is in this world, at least as of today, where speech is still a noble cause, still guaranteed in countries that value human thought. It is in this world that the words and thoughts of Jordan Peterson won the day on Channel 4, not just in the court of common sense and public opinion, but for the righteous cause of open debate. What the regressives are bemoaning is that there are contrary or differing opinions, and this is not an acceptable future for them. There is no doubt that Peterson was intelligent, determined, and quick. No doubt, indeed, that Channel 4 News interview was entertaining, but his words, on closer inspection, were vacuous and confusing, and he left gaps. Gaps? As in earning gaps? I thought he did quite well. And please note that both he and Cathy Newman, to her credit, both discussed gaps in pay, as we all know that the myth of wage gaps is just that. People who are paid at the same rate can easily earn more simply by working more. He failed to mention social conditioning, whereby boys are encouraged at school to study STEM subjects and play with action men, and to not show emotion. He failed to mention that any profession dominated by women, except at the very senior levels, goes hand in hand with being underpaid and undervalued, i.e. nursing and teaching. One could argue that this alleged social conditioning in education is carried out by women. A field, by your own words, is dominated by women. He overexploited one aspect of the pay gap, that some women prioritize work work-life balance over difficult careers, and that is why they are paid less. Overexploited? That's a rather odd use of words since you aren't denying the validity of the concept. Peterson did quite well on the subject, but you don't have a less exploited aspect of it, it seems. His answer as to why items marketed for women cost more than for men. Men don't put up with it. And he's right. He also failed to mention how centuries of patriarchy have brainwashed us, making us accept the status quo as logical and necessary, and one that benefits us all. He believes it too. To quote from a Doctor Who story, the weak enslave themselves. If you are making the case that women do not have agency and are easily talked into being inferior, then you are not making a good case in favor of equality. I play for you the lead up to the gotcha moment that is going to be mentioned.
Okay, you cited freedom of speech in that. Why should your right to freedom of speech trump a trans person's right not to be offended?
Gotcha, Peterson said when Newman fell silent for a few seconds. Peterson laughed. The joke was on her, in a way. No matter what she would have asked, a woman daring to question his expertise was bound to have ramifications, especially in 2018.
Because in order to be able to think, you have to risk being offensive. I mean, look at the conversation we're having right now. You know, like you're certainly willing to risk offending me in the pursuit of truth. Why should you have the right to do that? It's been rather uncomfortable.
Well, I'm very glad I put you on the spot.
Well,
I'm very glad that I have exercised my freedom of speech.
You get my point. It's like you're doing what you should do, which is digging a bit to see what the hell's going on. So and that is what you should do. But you're exercising your freedom of speech to certainly risk offending me. And that's fine. I think more power to you as far as I'm concerned.
Except you haven't sat there and I'm just trying to work that out. I mean,
ha, gotcha.
You have got me. You have got me. I'm trying to work that through in my head. Yeah, it took a while.
It did.
Oh, yes. That was a great moment, indeed. And that smile, she handled it quite well. But here is an interesting take on that very moment. I give Cathy Newman much more credit as an adult person with the ability to voice her own opinions. You do not. She is necessarily a victim. What is very strange is that 2018 was supposed to be when the ruling patriarchy has conceded much power. But Miss Newman is unable to dare to question Jordan Peterson. He pointed out that she agreed and felt glad about making him feel uncomfortable. This hardly supports your assumption that Cathy Newman is required to be a frail and fainting Victorian lady.
No, I really think
the patriarchal system is just fine.
That's silly. I do. I think that's silly. I really do. I mean, look at your situation. You're hardly unsuccessful.
Yeah, and I have battled quite hard to get where I've got to.
Good.
So that's okay. Battling is good. This is all about the fight.
It's inevitable.
But you talk about men fighting. I mean, let me just put another thing to you from the book.
Why
You're
wouldn't
saying
you have to battle for a high-quality position?
Which is pretty much the point of this fallout from the discussion between two adults on Channel 4. Fans of Professor Peterson are applauding his skills in this interview, but from the feminist perspective, he was a fierce aggressor and she, the victim. In a truly gender-equal society, your side will have to learn that a civil discussion is just that, not predator and prey. Remember, Peterson was invited onto the show.
You have voluntarily come into the studio and agreed to be questioned.
Gotcha.